Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our weekly Zeise's Right chat by Paul Zeise of the Post-Gazette. Paul, we got a lot to talk about. The endless Brandon Aiyuk rumors. What are the Steelers' other options if that deal does not happen? Do they have any interest in those options? Our Ray Fittipaldo at the Post-Gazette has some doubts. We're going to toss that around. Some other things just related to the receivers, not necessarily to Brandon Aiyuk. Then we're going to get into the Pirates and some philosophical questions as they are in the middle of their 10-game losing streak. Paul, before we do that, just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast, Pella Windows and Doors. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Okay, Paul, Ray said yesterday on your air at 93.7 The Fan that he believes the Steelers are content to go into the season with the guys they have at receiver if they don't get Brandon Aiyuk from the San Francisco 49ers. Are you content with that group as constituted? Van Jefferson, Quez, Watkins, Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson, that group of guys behind George Pickens?
I think you and I have talked about this now for 18 months, and especially over the last 6 months. And so the answer is still the same as it was 6 months ago, Adam, which is no. It feels to me like, again, I think we talked a little bit about this last week. It feels to me like they traded Deontay Johnson and didn't have a plan. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, and that's kind of the question that I want to get into. Is, do you think that this is what they had in mind when they traded him? Or do you think that, they would have made a different call if they knew they'd be in this situation? Because on one hand, you say yes, because you look at what they have, but on the other, you hear them say things like, yeah, they're confident. There's plenty of other receivers out there they could look into, Paul. And I don't think they have to be on the caliber of Brandon Aiyuk, where you're talking about a $30 million a year contract. You can get a guy for $10 million. You can make moves for those type of guys. You could have made those types of moves in free agency and not been this desperate. It seems like they wouldn't do anything differently, even though you and I definitely think they should have.
Right. And that's the thing. I think they've convinced themselves now that Van Jefferson is good enough, right? That Calvin Watkins is good enough, and that the two of them combined with George Pickens in Arthur Smith's offense, which we can't forget that whole line of or point of discussion, which is, well, this is a different offense and they need tight ends, and they use their tight ends, so they really don't need a second receiver, which, Adam, as you know, is one of the silliest things that I've heard, is that they don't need a second receiver because this offense is so tight end heavy. I don't buy that. I've never bought that. Now, you and I could be sitting here 6 weeks from now saying we were absolutely wrong about Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin. I don't think we will be, but we could be. And then you say, well, that's why they make the big money, because they're the ones that, put this team together. They're the ones that figured it out. They're the ones that have decided that they evaluate, the talent the one way. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're good enough at receiver if they don't get Brandon Aiyuk. And quite frankly, I don't know about you, but I'm reading the tea leaves. It doesn't sound like they're going to. It sounds like Brandon Aiyuk has basically used the Steelers and the Browns and the Patriots and the Commanders to squeeze every little dime he can out of a new deal from the 49ers, so that he doesn't have to play this year without having all of his money already in the bag for the future. So to me, I think that they're not going to get Brandon Aiyuk. And since they're not going to get Brandon Aiyuk, they probably are not going to be good enough at receiver.
Do you think this is a matter, Paul, where you can justify saying, all right, let's see what they can do with what they've got with this offense, the guys who've been in that room all off season, and then do you think Omar Khan is capable of saying in week 4 or week 5, this isn't working, the trade deadline's coming up, we're going to make a move at that point. These guys who are available now are going to be available then. Maybe you can get them for less because you're not trading for them for a whole season. I mean, if that is the approach, can you see some wisdom in that of taking a little bit more patient approach and seeing what happens before the deadline, because this is not the NFL of 2001 here. We see these types of deals happen now in the NFL. It's not like the MLB trade deadline or the NBA trade deadline, but things happen now before the NFL trade deadline.
No, there's no question, Adam. I should go back and say this. I believe if they don't get Brandon Aiyuk, and I think I just said I don't think they're going to get him, they will make one of those deals right before the end of training camp for a waiver wire guy. Now I don't know if they'll be able to hit the home run like they did when they got Joe Hayden. If you remember, they got Joe Hayden real late in training camp. I don't believe that they'll be able to do that, but I do think that they will be able to go out and get a veteran receiver, because as you know, there will be guys who are cut. There will be guys who are put on a trading block for extremely cheap because the team believes that, well, you know what we need to do here? We need to, trim the fat on our salary cap. And this is an old guy here who, is making too much money. A guy like D.K. Metcalf, don't be surprised if he's available in 2 weeks. Somebody like that, who the team looks at his salary, looks at his age, and basically says, we can do this a lot cheaper. So I do believe the Steelers will make some kind of move to get another receiver in here before the end or before the first game, like when they go through their 3 exhibition games and then there's cut down day. I think they will pick up somebody, or they'll make a trade for somebody. It wouldn't shock me if they could make a trade, even for like a Metcalf, like a 4th round pick or something, or whatever, some because teams are going to look, they're going to look at, okay, how do we trim our salary cap number? Who's the player that makes the most sense? And there's always 1 or 2 guys. So my thing with that is they will do that. But I do think Omar Khan, if they got 4 weeks into the season and hadn't done that, and what we think might happen happens, yeah, I absolutely could see him going out and making a move.
Yeah, I mean, that would be un-Steelers-like, but, what have we talked about all offseason? So, I'm willing to give him even into the season before I cast judgment on the decisions they've made, unless they really, go in the tank, start 0-4, start like the Vikings did last season. Then I think it'll be obvious that probably should have been more aggressive. But, I don't think that's the outcome that's going to happen. I think it's more likely that you have an average start, and then you see if you can bounce back from there. It's just that tough schedule that's going to be on people's minds. I wanted to ask this question because JuJu's out there, Paul. Do you have any interest whatsoever?
Adam, as you can see, I've changed places. I was sitting in my car because I couldn't find my headphones, which is why I don't have headphones today. I mean, I can be what are they called? When you rip yourself, whatever that word is, when I say that I couldn't find my headphones. So I was trying to sit in my car where I could have it nice and quiet. And of course, it's hot outside. And I didn't realize if your phone, did you ever have that happen where your phone overheats? It shoots a big message on it that says temperature too high. You cannot use your phone until it cools down. Has that ever happened?
I don't think it's ever happened, but I've gotten close. So I'm familiar.
That's what I'm saying. So now I'm in a nice air-conditioned studio, and hopefully we can get through the rest of the show without any more interruptions. I appreciate all of your patience out there, and yours especially, Adam, because dealing with me is a nightmare. Anyway, JuJu is not somebody that I have any interest in. And I'll tell you why. It's not about the TikToks. It's not about the dancing. It's not about the, immaturity. It's not about any of that stuff, Adam. I don't care. That stuff to me is almost irrelevant. It really is. It's something that a lot of people tried to make a big deal about, but to me, it's almost irrelevant. I don't think the guy can play anymore. I think is he better than, Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin or, who else do we got? Quez Watkins or even the kid from Michigan, Roman Wilson. I don't know that is he better than any of those guys? At the very least, he's as good as those guys, which maybe speaks volumes about those guys. But why bring another guy who's not going to help you get better? I don't understand it. this is one of the weirdest dynamics, Adam. And someday you and I will, be sitting somewhere and, I'll be close. I'll be retired and, you'll still be working and we'll have a few adult beverages and we will look back on 2023 and 24 at the Steelers wide receiver position and how unbelievably weird their approach to it has been. Given that they went out and got a quarterback, a one-year guy basically, in Russell Wilson, they made a bunch of other moves that suggest that this is the year they're trying to win. They're trying to really go for it this year. And yet, at one of the most important positions, which is receiver, they didn't do anything to get better. It's just very strange to me.
They did things to get worse. I mean, they did one big thing to get worse. And listen, I'm not the biggest Deontay Johnson fan in the world either, Paul, but at this point, I think you'd be a lot better off with him. And all this confidence that you have about the Arthur Smith offense would make a lot more sense because you had two serviceable, receivers. And I think that might be all you need. We would maybe be sitting here talking about the number 3 receiver in Arthur Smith's offense, but I think that's a much less important conversation than the one that we've been having.
Right.
Speaking of number 3 options, though, Paul, curious what your thoughts are on Roman Wilson and how he fits into this whole conversation. Gets hurt early in training camp, and just as there have been rave reviews about all these other rookies and how great they are, Mason McCormick, Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Peyton Wilson has maybe gotten more praise than all 4 of them. Roman Wilson's kind of faded to the background. Does that concern you at all beyond just the, obviously he got hurt and he was going to be behind those guys, but does it concern you at all that no one's saying yet, like, oh yeah, he's back with a vengeance and we really think he's going to be, back on track here for too long? I'm not hearing any of that conversation. And I think a lot of people were putting a lot of hope that Roman Wilson could be different than these guys that we're talking about. If not by game 1, then maybe by game 8, 9, 10.
Well, no, I mean, here's the thing, and I know this is kind of interesting, but bear with me on this. Every summer I participate in the Cam Hayward celebrity softball game. Basically, I pitch and throw gopher balls to the Steelers, and everyone gets excited because they hit them over the fence, right? They like me pitching to them because I throw them balls that are easy to hit. So that being said, I saw Roman Wilson for the first time at that event, and my first thoughts were, obviously, I saw him run from first to third. And my first thoughts are he's pretty fast, he's quick, he's clearly really athletic. But boy, he's got to put on a little bit of weight. So it won't shock me if he's a guy that we really don't even see the best of until like a year from now or 2 years from now, because he's I don't want to say skinny, but if he's going to play the way that he wants to play, which is that real physical style and everything that we saw at Michigan, he's got to put on some weight. He's got to get a little bit bigger. And that might be why, he's, I don't want to say falling behind, but he's not quite where we thought he would be. Probably that plays into it a little bit, is that he's got to gain some weight. He's got to get a little bit bigger and stronger if he's really going to get to where he wants to go.
Well, I mean, that might explain part of the fall, Paul, in terms of, we were talking about, should the Steelers draft him in at some point in the draft process? We were talking about him as a first round guy and certainly a second round guy. He falls to them in the third. So, I think that lends credence to that, and that maybe this is more of a red shirt year that, guys have in the NFL, especially at that position. So I just find it curious that people do not talk about him the same way they talk about the other rookies at the time of year when you're supposed to talk about all of them like they can do anything. That's right. Not really the vibe I'm getting there. Let's get into the Pirates, Paul. I think there's a lot of interesting topics we can get into in the middle of a 10-game losing streak here after they get swept by the Padres this week. I'm going to start with this. The Bucko Ball blog, which I think is one of the better fan blogs out there for the Pirates, asked this question: why is Oneil Cruz such a lightning rod for so many people, given that, listen, he's not a perfect baseball player by any means. I think he's been quite underdeveloped. We were sold a much bigger star than what he has been with the Pirates. I think there's plenty to criticize about him, but he's on a team with a bunch of bums. And rather than talk about all the bums, we're talking about his 3 errors in one game or his 1 error, the one night. And the worst defender of this, Paul, I feel is the Pirates broadcast and Greg Brown. I mean, he crushed Oneil Cruz for that error Tuesday night. And then, 10 minutes later, Rowdy Tellez isn't hustling to second and it gets basically waved away like it's no big deal. Why is it like this for Oneil Cruz? Why is he a lightning rod for people? Despite the fact that he's one of the few productive players on this team?
Well, I think there's 2 reasons. 2. One, I think people are getting Gregory Polanco vibes, and I don't know that that's fair, but that's what they're getting, right? Is this another example of a guy that we were told is a 5-tool player who's unbelievably talented, who's going to revolutionize baseball, that turns out to be somebody who by the end of his career here, we don't want to watch him play a single inning ever again. So that's not fair to Oneil Cruz, but it's a comparison that people make because of his size and, where he's from and his skill set. I think secondly, the other part of it is, unfortunately, Oneil Cruz at times comes off as being aloof. I'm not saying he is aloof, but he sort of sometimes is a little too nonchalant for people, and they take that as he's being lazy, which I don't know that that's necessarily the case. The third thing, and this is the big thing, is expectations. I mean, this guy, people were calling him a unicorn. This is a guy, and then they look, all around the league, there's all these other guys that are young guys that are just, doing all these great things. And, maybe Cruz in some ways, I mean, he's only played 195, 200 games. The other part of it is, as we've talked about many times, he's 6'6" or whatever it is. There are going to be some holes in his swing. There just are. There's going to be some holes in his swing path where he's probably always going to be a guy that strikes out a little bit. But I think the most maddening thing are the errors, because he leads the league in errors. And he seemingly is resistant to changing his position. So all of that, you put it together. I mean, I think the Pirates fans thought they were going to get, the second coming of Barry Bonds or something. And in reality, they feel like, well, maybe we're getting the second coming of Gregory Polanco. I don't think it's necessarily. I do agree with you, Adam, that I think that people need to take a deep breath, take a step back and realize if he's not your best player, he's probably your second best player.
I looked it up, Paul, while you were talking. He's a 2.2 wins above replacement player, which makes him on pace to be a 3-win player. That's good. I mean, it's not star level. And here's my question: whose fault is the expectation thing? Is it my fault? Because I certainly wasn't hyping him to that degree on this podcast. I don't think you were on all your various work. It was the hype came from the very top with the Pirates.
Right.
AT&T Sportsnet, the broadcasters, and listen, it's their job to get people excited. But we've gone through this. I think Gregory Polanco is a good point of comparison, but there are other prospects that they did the same. I think Starling Marte is probably the second best Pirate of my living memory. If we're really like just looking at the numbers, like certainly I was born in 1990, so those Barry Bonds, I was alive for that. I have no recollection of it, so. I think if you're ranking Pirates from, let's say, 1995, when I gained consciousness, to the present, Starling Marte's got to be in the conversation for the second best Pirate behind Andrew McCutchen. And he never outran the label that he didn't live up to expectations here. He did 5-6 win seasons that people just thought, well, he's not going 40-40. So,
right.
We're not. So whose fault is it that the expectations get out of control here? And I think it's worth asking that question if the same broadcast is now going to crush him every night when he makes mistakes.
Right. Again, I think that's the point, is the expectations were so high for this guy. It really is, incredible that he could even come close to living up to any of that. I mean, it's almost not fair what he's been, especially, again, he lost almost a whole season. He's only played 190, 200 games. The errors, the fielding has to get better. And I think part of the problem, too, is Those errors directly led to 2 losses. And right now, people are really, really, really angry about the Pirates losing games. And, the Astros, they're getting ready to sweep the Astros. That was a disaster, so I get it. But I keep telling people, today, in fact, on my show, Joe Starkey, my colleague or our colleague at the Post-Gazette and also my partner on radio, he was talking about maybe Shelton needs to bench him to send a message. I'm like, if you're Derek Shelton, you're going to bench the one guy that actually can hit the ball out of the ballpark, the one guy who actually can drive the ball to the gaps and whatever. You're not. You're not going to cut off your nose to spite your face that way. He's one of your best players.
Yeah, and it's just, I think it's the product of everything that's around him. It's like, part of the reason Gregory Polanco failed, I think, is because he was around some good players, right? Or at least that people perceived him to be such a massive failure, is that he was surrounded by solid players and he was not carrying his weight. Oneil Cruz is carrying his weight more than practically anyone else whose name isn't Brian Reynolds, Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, Mitch Keller, and Andrew McCutcheon. I mean, that's the group of guys. So to that point, Paul, Derek Shelton, I think he said on your show this week that they've been playing good baseball for 4 months and then they had 10 bad days. Is that true? Because I see a team that played 500 the whole season and then collapsed and now is out of it because, as we've talked about for several weeks on the show, they didn't do the things that they needed to do in June and July to be able to handle something like this that happens over the course of a season. 10-game losing streak, okay, maybe that's a little extreme. But teams lose 6, 7, 8 fairly routinely, don't they?
Well, I think one of the things that I said earlier this week is, when they had that 6-week stretch, right, where they were like, let's say they were 38-28 or something like that, right? They had a stretch where they went from 5 under to like 4 over. If you looked at their run differential, they probably were playing above their head a little bit. And so, this is sort of a regression to the means is what's going on. I think at times they played really good baseball, and during that stretch, I mean, if you think about it, they got timely hitting, they pitched well, they made really good plays in the field, but overall, and I hate saying this because I continue to have to say this to people, there are 42 games left. The body of work is 120 games, not 8 games, not 10 games, not 5 games, not 15 games in June. You know what I mean? And their body of work suggests they're 8 games under 500 through 120 games. Let's say for the next 42 games, if they go 4 games under 500, so that would put them at what, 17 and what is that? 17 and 27, I guess, or no, 17 and 25. Is that math right? Yeah, that's 42.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Let's say they go, Adam, let's say they go, 19 and 23. I mean, guess what? Now you're talking about 75 wins, which is exactly what you had last year. So my point there is the long haul of the season does not lie about who you are, ever. And that's what I think a lot of people are struggling with. They saw glimpses of a good team, but you got to be able to do it. You got to be able to do it for 162 games. They have proven they don't have the depth to do it. As we talked about early on, one of the most troubling signs that there was, Adam, was that stretch at the beginning of the season, even into June, when they were getting unbelievable starting pitching every night, and they still were like 4 games under 500 or 3 games under 500. You and I talked about it on this show, that this pitching is unbelievable right now. It's going to regress some. When it regresses, what's it going to look like? Well, we're starting to see a little bit now. Mitch Keller has sprung some leaks. Bednar has sprung some leaks. Holderman is, a full-blown geyser of oil blowing out, right? I mean, the only guy, even Skeens has, shown vulnerable that he's human. The only guy who seemingly kept it together throughout all this is Aroldis Chapman, who's gotten better and better and better. But guess what? He's a specialty guy that only pitches 1 inning. So that's what we're seeing. You are what your record says you are. And after 120 games, without all the but, this is a team that is what, 56-64, I think.
Yeah, and I think, just getting back to, early in the season, so it feels like what Derek Shelton's trying to preach here is like the Mike Tomlin doctrine of, oh, you build the team chemistry over the season, and you really want to. I don't think baseball is that sport. A, and B, Derek Shelton's never done that. Say what you want about Mike Tomlin, he's done it a dozen times, of having his teams maybe start slower, but they're playing good football at the end of the season. You get into the playoffs last year, you're fighting for a playoff berth, and Kenny Pickett's rookie season with all of the problems they were facing. So when Mike Tomlin says it, I can believe it. When Derek Shelton says it, it doesn't carry weight from him to say, yeah, we played generally good baseball, and this is a bad stretch, and we'll get past it. They're done. They're done now.
Right.
Paul, I'll get you out of here on this. It just feels like they are failing at their own criteria more than anything else. If you want to say, we can have a payroll conversation 100 times, that's not going to change. It should change. Bob Nutting should change it. But that was not the criteria with which Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton were brought in here. The criteria is we're going to develop players and we're going to build from within, and it's going to be really good. Their minor league system was ranked 27th this week. I think it was MLB Pipeline. It was one of the major services, ranked them 27th. I mean, is that alone not a fireable offense by the criteria that they set for themselves? Not like us sitting here and saying they didn't spend enough, Ben Cherington should be fired for that. No, the criteria that they set for themselves, the way they said to judge them.
Well, here's the thing, okay? Adam, couple things. Here's why the payroll thing is just, to me, a whole big heap of BS. Here's why. Look at the Orioles and the Indians and their payrolls, okay? They both stripped it down, Adam, and built it back up. Those teams don't have high payrolls. You want to know why? Because they have young guys who are on pre-arbitration and early arbitration contracts, guys they drafted and or traded for as prospects, developed, and now have them in a line to a point where they have the Orioles have such an embarrassment of riches. They traded their outfield, their center, all-star center fielder, because they needed to make room for this young kid or this other kid that came up, and so they have an embarrassment of young talent prospect guys who don't cost a lot of money. What model does that sound like to you? Oh, that's right. It's the one we're supposed to be buying that they're doing here in Pittsburgh. The problem is they haven't been good at drafting. I mean, okay, guess what, Adam? I don't know a whole lot about baseball, but I watched the College World Series last year. Pretty sure I could have come to the conclusion, let's draft this Paul Skeens guy, okay? So, my point is, they haven't been great at drafting, haven't been great at developing, haven't been great at making trades either. Look at a bunch of these established guys they traded, brought back prospects. Look at those prospects, right? Very few where you say, wow, they got the best of that trade. And so it's not about payroll at this point.
Yes.
3 years from now, okay, maybe, because then a lot of these guys who allegedly or supposedly should be in their pre-arbitration years, and they're like the Orioles and the Indians, guess what? Now you might have to sign those guys to real money, in order to keep them, and you might have to add a couple of players here and there. But Adam, where are all these guys at? Where are these prospects at that we're told, you know what I mean? For 5 years, they've been hoarding them. They've been telling us they're hoarding them, they're developing them, all that other stuff that we've heard for 5 years. Just be patient. It's coming. Just be patient. I'm telling you.
But now they're here. They're here. The answer is they're here, and there's nothing behind them. And that's, to me, the biggest indictment is that, I think you could sell this season to me, Paul, if they had 3-4 still, huge prospects that you felt confident about in AAA and AA. They don't. They have Bubba, Chandler, and maybe a few other guys.
Let's go here. Okay? On any given night, the Pirates starting lineup is Joey Bart, is he homegrown? Is he somebody they, groomed and drafted? Or is he someone they signed off to scrap heap because they needed a catcher and he's turned out to be a lot better than they thought he was? Mostly because they had nothing to do with developing him, right? Who's your first baseman? Oh, that's right. Rowdy Tellez. They got him in free agency this year. You want to give him Nick Gonzalez? Okay, but I think that we can both agree that the jury is way out on him, right? Oneil Cruz isn't their guy. He's not their guy, okay? You want to give him credit for that? I guess so, but he wasn't their guy. In fact, I think they traded for him, didn't they? I think they traded for him, and if I'm not mistaken, he inherited him, I think.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think he inherited him. I think traded him. Brian Hayes, they inherited from Neil Huntington. Okay? Outfield. Michael A. Taylor signed him this year. Brian De La Cruz signed him, a week ago or whatever it was. Brian Reynolds inherited him from the last guy. All I'm trying to say is, okay, where is all this homegrown talent? Where are all these, 5 years of losing and hoarding prospects? They're fiction. They don't exist. So that's why I will not let them off the hook by saying, oh, well, payroll makes it tough for them. Draft better, develop better, make better trades. Do that with young guys and that are pre-arbitration guys that don't cost a lot of money. And guess what? When you can't sign them to second contracts, then I'll listen to you about the payroll.
Yeah, well, and to Bob Nutting's credit, he had signed a major extension each of the last 3 years of this process. And I, if you're a Pirates fan, I don't know how much more you can ask than that, but you're going to get to a point where you don't have guys to sign. So like I said, they're failing by their own definition of success, not by mine, not by yours, but what they told us they'd do when they were sitting in that office, when they hired Ben Cherington. They're failing by that standard, and something has to change, or then something has to change major. Paul, I'm going to let you go. Thanks for stopping by. Apologies for the technical difficulties, everybody. Did you have anything else, Paul?
No, I said thank you for your patience today. I owe you a bourbon or something.
I will take you up on that. Everyone, if you enjoyed the video, please like it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. Stay tuned to the channel. We're going to have a lot more from the South Side, the joint practices between the Steelers and Bills. Chris Carter, Brian Bacco, Ray Fittipaldi, they're all down there. So stay tuned to the channel for that. Make sure you're subscribed, and we will talk to you again in the same space next week.
All right, we'll see you, man.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.